Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting in about a few minutes. Could I please ask you to take your seats, please?
Xin mời mấy chị hát ca lên sân khấu chuẩn bị hát. Dạ, xin quý vị lưu ý, nhà vệ sinh là bên phía tay trái, bên đây lối thoát hiện là phía đường sau. Rồi xin quý vị lưu ý tắt điện thoại cho buổi lễ ngày hôm nay. Xin cảm ơn.
Our Indigenous elder, to please join us on stage for our welcome to country. Welcome, Auntie Zeta.
Welcome, and how are you all? And my name is Auntie Sita. We acknowledge our ancestors who walked this land from the beginning of time. They were the knowledge holders and keepers of the oldest living culture on earth. We acknowledge the creative spirit, Angel, who comes in the form of a wedge-tailed eagle, is the maker of all things. And Wa, the black crow, the keeper of the wind and waterways. They are the two lawmakers for the Kulin nation. There are 5 tribes in the Kulin nation: the Jaja Wurrung near Bendigo, the Wapururong near Geelong, Tunarurong up in the mountains, Woonawurrung along the coast, and the Woiwurrung, which covers Melbourne, Nine. Everyone knew their tribal boundaries back then that separate all the clans, mountains, rivers and rock formations. I must, as our custom requires, to acknowledge our ancestors. I acknowledge Wonga, who was my ancestor from the Narragatta, and senior leader, lawman, songman, and a good fellow. He left his name in the history books of this country. Also pay respects to my grandfather. It's my direct descendant from the Yarra Yarra clan of the Wurundjeri tribe. I'm going to tell you a little bit with my welcomes. I give you a bit of history about what happened on our country, on Aboriginal country. And my grandfather was born in the 1800s, and because of a government policy, all our people were put onto mission stations, and then after a certain while, they were then told to go out and mix in the community and assimilate. So my grandfather went to another mission station, Cumragunja Aboriginal Reserve along the Murray River, Bungala, and married into Yorta Yorta, my nan. I acknowledge all our elders, all Aboriginal elders today right across the country, and all our people, and everyone here today. Welcome to you. Welcome to Wurundjeri country. And I'll just tell you a little bit about our country. The protocols is based on old traditional Aboriginal law and practice that has been handed down over many thousands of years. It means you can come onto country for ceremony or share food source and so forth. But before you're welcome, you usually have to go through a smoking ceremony, and that is to cleanse the area and the person of bad energy and spirits. We believe in that world. We have a spiritual connection to the waterways, the moon, the sun and the stars, the Birrong River. You all know it as the Yarra River. It's a very special river to our people, and to know some of the story and the history of our people living on that river over time is important to us. Since first contact of this country, the lives of Aboriginal people changed forever. After thousands of years of the old way of living in harmony with the land and each other, our land was stolen, our ceremony and language was stopped, our children were taken away, and the old way of life that we once had gone forever. And it's the duty of all Aboriginal people to pass a little bit of our history on to our new visitors, people that's on our country today. Just a little bit about myself. I'm one of 13 children who grew up on the riverbanks and always on the outskirts of town. My parents raised a lot of their nieces and nephews. Their parents had passed away and so forth. So in our community, your aunties and your uncles are your mothers and fathers, and your cousins, all the cousins that we all have, they're your sisters and brothers. So that's still today within our community. We all got big mobs, big families. I want to just say a little bit about, as I said, I come from a big family, and I have mainly sisters in my family, and some of my sisters were invited to Vietnam to tour and singing group in the 1969, I think it was. Yeah, and that was for the American forces. And they spoke, they actually lived with Vietnamese family. They often speak about how welcome they were made to feel and how lovely. That was their good memories of that trip. And that actually there was a film made about my family members called The Sapphires. And so anyway, I just give a little bit of that information because that's my connection with my my sister's being in Vietnam, went to Saigon and so forth. But we have many stories we could share with you, but today is not the day. But I think this is a beautiful venue, and I'm very happy to be invited here today to speak with you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of you all.
Thank you, Auntie Zeta. That was such a beautiful and authentic welcome to country. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the Republic of Vietnam anthem and a minute of silence.
Lễ chào quốc kỳ quốc Việt bắt đầu.
A minute of silence to commemorate our ancestors who fought to protect our sovereignty. A minute of silence to commemorate the 521 Australian soldiers, allies, men and women of the former Republic of Vietnam who laid down their lives protecting freedom in South Vietnam. A A minute of silence to commemorate the hundreds and thousands of Vietnamese people who lost their lives and perished in jungles or at sea in search for freedom and the very life we have today. A minute of silence to commemorate the rights activists who are still under the oppression of the communist regime. A minute of silence to commemorate the people who have lost their lives to COVID-19. A minute of silence commences.
Một phút mặc niệm để tưởng nhớ các bậc tiền nhân đã có công kiến quốc, lập quốc và bảo vệ Tổ quốc. Phút mặc niệm để tưởng nhớ đến các chiến sĩ quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa và các chiến sĩ quân đội đồng minh Úc đã hy sinh vì tự do cho miền Nam Việt Nam. Phút mặc niệm để tưởng nhớ đến những đồng bào kém may mắn đã bỏ mình trên đường vượt biên, vượt thoát chế độ cộng sản phi nhân. Phút mặc niệm để tưởng nhớ đến các nhà tranh đấu dân chủ đã hy sinh trong các ngục tù của cộng sản vì nhân quyền Việt Nam. Và phút mặc niệm cho các nạn nhân đã mất đi mạng sống vì đại dịch Covid-19. Phút mặc niệm bắt đầu. National anthem and the minute of silence finished. Please be seated. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional lands that we are meeting on today. And I would like to acknowledge the Yarra Yarra clan of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Thank you. Today we are here to enjoy, learn, connect with people on this land that you have looked after for over 70,000 years.
Chúng tôi xin được bày tỏ lòng biết ơn với những người Yarra Yarra bộ tộc Wurundjeri, người Wurundjeri của quốc gia Kulin. Hôm nay chúng ta được vui hưởng, học hỏi và kết nối với những người đã gìn giữ lục địa này hơn 70.000 năm.
On behalf of the board and project management office, some of them stand behind me today as part of the choir, welcome to the Vietnamese Museum Australia relaunch, and thank you for joining us today. We are honoured and excited that you are here today. Your time at our relaunch means that you're already playing an important role in supporting the Vietnamese Museum Australia, serving our community and continuing to enrich our legacy. I would also like to extend this welcome from and acknowledge the service and contribution of the directors and the team members who have played such a key role and establishment today and our progress to date.
Tôi rất vinh dự để giới thiệu với quý vị các thành viên trong hội đồng quản trị, ủy ban điều hành và các tiểu ban thuộc Viện Bảo tàng người của người Việt tự do Úc Châu. Xin được chào đón và cảm ơn quý vị đã đến tham dự buổi lễ tái phát động chiến dịch gây quỹ cho việc xây dựng Viện Bảo Tàng. Hôm nay chúng tôi rất vinh dự được đón tiếp quý vị. Sự hiện diện của quý vị có ý nghĩa là quý vị đang giữ một vai trò quan trọng, đang hỗ trợ Viện Bảo Tàng, đang phục vụ cộng đồng của chúng ta và đang làm giàu thêm di sản của chúng ta. Nhân đây, chúng tôi cũng xin cảm ơn sự đóng góp của các cựu thành viên của Hội đồng Quản trị, của các tiểu ban trong giai đoạn đầu và những giai đoạn tiếp nối.
My name is Haiju Ford, and like some of you, my connection is that I'm a Vietnamese refugee who arrived in Australia in 1979. My parents are the longest residing Vietnamese family in Geraldton, Western Australia, for 41 years, still as market gardeners, growing tomatoes and still with all their own stories. Because of them and the opportunities available in Australia, I received a great education, allowing me to establish my own career and family. And like many of you, I also wish to give back to this incredible opportunity that we have been given so that my children and their children can enjoy the rich history of the Vietnamese Australians.
Tôi tên là Hà Diệu Võ Phốt. Cũng như quý vị, tôi là người tị nạn Việt Nam đến Úc năm 1979 khi mới 2 tuổi. Cha mẹ tôi là những người cư ngụ lâu năm nhất tại Geraldton, Tây Úc, 41 năm. Hiện vẫn có nông trại trồng cà chua. Như là người tị nạn, cha mẹ tôi vẫn có những câu chuyện về người tị nạn của cha mẹ tôi.
Now, what a lineup we have for you today. So today you'll hear about all the developments, and here's what to expect. So you'll hear from Mr. Bruce Mulgenhall on behalf of the board of the directors and our progress since 2019, followed by our keynote speaker, a pivotal figure in the Vietnamese immigration in the late 1970s, the Honourable Mr. Ian McPhee AO. And joining in support, you'll also hear from the presidents of the National and the Victorian Vietnamese Community of Australia. Joining in support for this project, we will also be hearing from the Honourable Jason Woods, Federal Assistant Minister for Multicultural Affairs, the local Member of Parliament for Maribyrnong since 2007, the Honourable Bill Shorten, Shadow Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Shadow Minister for Government Services. Followed by Vietnamese National State Parliamentarian Dr. Tien Gill, as well as Mr. Bernie Finn, also member of the Victorian State Parliament. From Maribyrnong's own Mayor and Councillor Anthony Tran. And finally, I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear from Chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission, Miss Vivian Nguyen. Could I just thank you very much for the project management team and the board. If I could invite you to leave the stage, thank you very much. Actually. So we all know that the Vietnamese love to balance a bit of hard work, socialising and having fun. So we're delighted to also bring some cultural entertainment and fun to our through our contemporary hat dance and our Yai parade later on. I'm sure you'll be entertained, informed and impressed by the dedication and passion of our speakers, and perhaps they may also inspire you to consider and think about ways that you may wish to make a difference. There are so many ways. So without hesitation, the first person I would like to invite has had a long history amid the Vietnamese community. A former local member of the Parliament for Footscray, the key to the inauguration of the first Vietnamese Cultural Centre in Melbourne today. Please welcome the VMA chairperson, Mr. Bruce Mai Quỳnh Hồ.
Người đầu tiên tôi xin được giới thiệu là cựu dân biểu vùng Footscray, người cũng sinh hoạt với cộng đồng người Việt qua rất nhiều năm. Xin quý vị chào đón ông Bruce Mildenhall, quyền chủ tịch Hội đồng Quản trị Viện Bảo Tàng.
Change that photo, I think. Good afternoon and welcome to everybody. And thank you, Auntie Zita, who gave us the welcome to country. As we do meet on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I would also say that at a time like this, we should also spare a thought for and reflect on the unfolding tragedy in the Ukraine at the moment. It must bring particularly poignant memories for those of us in the audience who are from a refugee background. Can I also acknowledge the distinguished guests who are joining us today? It is a star-studded cast, where just about all of them are making a speech, but not everyone. If I could just quickly run through the list, we are honoured to have Ian McPhee and Mrs. Julie McPhee, the minister at the time of this great refugee movement to Australia. The Honourable Jason Wood, the Federal Minister, Assistant Minister for Multicultural Affairs. The Honourable Bill Shorten, Shadow Minister for National Disability Insurance Scheme and the Government Services. Another federal MP, Dr. Daniel Molino, whose area we will shortly take in the site of our museum. Dr. Tien Hu, the MP, the member for South Eastern Metropolitan in the State Parliament. Mr. Bernie Finn, the member for Western Metropolitan in the Upper House. The Honourable Luke Dinellan, the member for Narre Warren North. The Honourable Natalie Sullivan, member for St Albans. And in a couple of generations of MPs from Footscray, in addition to myself, my successor, the Honourable Marsha Thompson, is joining us, and the current member for Footscray, Katie Hall. Ms Vivian Nguyen, the chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission. Councillor Michael Clark, Councillor Anthony Tran, the Mayor of Maribyrnong City Council, Councillor Yokuera, Councillor Cook Land, also from Maribyrnong City Council, and Mr Num Kwok, the former Mayor of the Council. We're joined today by Ms Kate Wan, the President of the Vietnamese Community of Australia National Branch, and Mrs Cam Nguyen, who many of us know as the CEO of the Vietnamese Women's Association. A star-studded cast, and can I invite speakers following me that it's now not necessary to mention everyone. So I guess the first question is why is there, as many of my Vietnamese Australian friends would say, an Aussie chairing this board and project? Quite frankly, this is a large, difficult project with complex stakeholder relationships, and my predecessor, Phong Nguyen, OAM, worked himself to a point where there could be significant ongoing issues with his health. So he is on extended leave, and as his deputy, I'm steering the ship during this critical phase. And it is a critical stage in our project. We start from a position of strength. More than half the money funded from government, and thanks to Bill for starting the ball rolling, and Michael Suka for putting the signature on the cheque, and Dan Andrews and his team for matching that funding. Thanks to you, Dr. Tien. and in a bipartisan way to Bernie Finn for his enduring support of the community. We have a site, a design, a plan, and an amazing team of skilled volunteers and community leaders working on this. What's more, we have a vision that the story of one of the most difficult but inspiring and successful mass migration and refugee movements in Australian history can and should be told. But we have a major challenge, raising the remaining $6 or so million. COVID has been a tragedy for the whole community, but it has made fundraising for a community whose favourite method of getting together at a dinner function effectively impossible. It's doubly difficult when a major part of the Vietnamese Australian economy is hospitality and travel. So we will be calling on all our friends in the political and the broader community to lend a hand to get this project funded. I would normally say, from my experience in public life, that the task of $6 million is almost insurmountable, but nothing is beyond the capacity of the Vietnamese community. One of our board members, Anne Randall, the former director of the Good Friday Children's Hospital Appeal, tells a story that when the community approached her one year and offered to raise funds for the appeal, expecting an offer of $5,000 or $10,000, she was blown away when the figure offered and delivered was $500,000. The capacity of this community for hard work and the extent of the gratitude to Australia for taking them in their hour of need knows no limits. Another strength of our project is bipartisan support, which is vital and will be vital over the next few months as the political debate hots up in the lead up to federal and state elections. This may also be an issue in the Vietnamese Australian community as the community enters into a potentially divisive elections this year. We need the museum to be the unifying vision for the whole community in these difficult times. The history, the bravery, the determination of the refugees in the face of the most horrific danger deserves a prominent place in the Australian story, and we aim to deliver the physical manifestation of that. So look to our plans and join with us in our efforts to spread the word about the inspiring story of the Vietnamese Australian journey and help us build this museum to capture that story for the generations who have lived it and the children and the future generations that need to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce, for your deep passion towards the Vietnamese community and your stewardship towards the Vietnamese Museum project. Now, I would like to invite a wonderful and respected leader who was key in the decision-making of the Australian policy during a time when many of us and our families were refugees. Someone who we can give thanks to for our livelihood in Australia today. A humanitarian driven to uphold principles that are so important in creating the future we all want. Our former Minister for Immigration and Ethnic Affairs. Welcome, Mr. Ian McPhee, AO.
Bây giờ tôi xin được mời một nhà lãnh đạo tuyệt vời, được kính trọng, người đã có những quyết định liên quan đến người tị nạn trong thời kỳ chúng ta là người tị nạn. Một người có tấm lòng nhân đạo bao la, người thúc đẩy và duy trì những nguyên tắc rất quan trọng để tạo ra tương lai mà chúng ta mong muốn. Xin chào đón ông cựu Bộ trưởng Liên bang về di trú và sắc tộc sự vụ, ông Ian McPhee.
Thank you very much for the honour of being here, and I welcome, I think, Bruce's remarks say it all, just perfect in terms of what we should be trying to achieve now. The bipartisanship is crucial. What made it possible for us to have the refugee program we did was because the Labour and Liberal Party and National Party worked together to achieve it. And it would not have been possible in the splendid way it was otherwise. And we need that again to the extent that there's bipartisanship. Now it seems that they don't want anything. So I think we need to change that. But Bruce, on behalf of your committee, I congratulate you on what they're doing. Well, it's a great honour to be with you today, as it always is actually. And as you've mentioned, I was Minister of Immigration. It was actually 1979 to 82. And since then, I've had the privilege of participating in quite a lot of functions of this kind. And I've always concluded my comments by saying how much I appreciated the experience and getting to know Vietnamese who became wonderful citizens of Australia. And even as I walked in today, several of you said wonderful things about what I've been able to do, and I can only say with my heart how much I appreciate everything that you have done. But I'll come to that. In refugee camps, well, several of you mentioned that you'd been in Palau Badung when I was there, off the Gulf of Thailand, and that was a very moving experience for me. I shall never forget it. I've often mentioned it, but I won't have time today to amplify it. But it was a very moving experience to see people who arrived in rickety boats onto the Gulf and were being processed on what actually was Malaysian territory. And we had representatives from the Australian Department, and New Zealand, Canada and the US and the UNHCR. They were all there helping to determine, first of all, whether people really were refugees. That wasn't hard to determine. Second, where they might have relatives or people from their villages, whether they were in Canada, New Zealand, America or Australia. If they in fact didn't have any such relations, then the four countries processed them and brought them to wherever they arrived. And we had so many. It was truly wonderful. And you mentioned Malcolm Fraser. Malcolm and I shared many things in common. One important one was our abhorrence of racism, and we were determined to consolidate the end of the White Australia policy. And there was many people who came from Vietnam are more white than many Caucasian Australians. But anyway, it was a crucial time in our history. And I will never forget, we introduced the telephone interpreter service and telephone translation service. And I was walking through a hospital in Liverpool where there were a lot of Vietnamese. And I went past one door and a woman was crying. I looked in and she was Vietnamese. And so I called for a nurse, and the nurse said, "Oh, I think what's wrong is we've taken the baby." She just gave the baby. And we learned that we got hold of an interpreter who then explained what the practice was, to take the baby, clean it, and bring it back to the mother. But no one explained that to her. And apparently in Vietnam, that was not the practice. The baby was close to the mother all the time. So there were a whole lot of things that happened in those days. We never had enough interpreters to do the job as well as it could be done. But that was the beginning of making some changes like that. And my experience of Vietnamese in Australia is their resilience and their resourcefulness, their independence, and having fled tyranny and hating big buildings that were the government that deterred them or sent them off. We deliberately established migrant resource centres in little tiny shops in the streets, where people didn't feel attacked, and went in, and then the Vietnamese became renowned for smiles. Smiles is one of the big things, and when they, for example, sought employment, went to interviews, compared with the other people who were from other countries, the Vietnamese smiled a lot, looked very welcoming people, and many of them got jobs when their talents were equal to other people. They got jobs because of that, the personality, and that warm smile has continued. And when I was on Livestream, that again was an experience. The way people applied themselves to the challenge. Livestream was an empty island, and they were able to cultivate and live on the island until such times as we could move them somewhere else. But it was a very moving episode in my life. And of course, visiting all the detention centres that we had here in Australia was the same. And very, very moving experiences. And I have at home something I always cherished. A man who was on Livestream at the time, when he finally got into Australia, he came to see me as minister and gave me a wonderful replica of the boats on which they had been travelling. And this is a phenomenal piece of work. You can move the doors, and it's just so elaborately accurate to what the boats were that they came on. And the importance again of Livestream was that none of our migrants, and we settled them in every state in Australia, there were settlement centres in the capital cities, and some in the rural areas. But they were never behind barbed wire in the desert, or in Manus Island or Nauru. They were given opportunities to go out and get skills, and to add to the skills they already had. We used TAFE colleges and so forth, and we enabled them to get jobs, and when they could pay a rent, they left the settlement centre, and then other people from camps came in and settled in those areas. It was a big decision, and the contribution of the Vietnamese to Australia has been very profound. I admire their ethics, their courage, and their determination, and their humanity. And the contribution, as you know, across a spectrum of community activities, commerce, education, health, cuisine, and a range of artworks. 2 young Australians of the year were Vietnamese, and one of them, Kudo, became a fine filmmaker. And there's not time for me to amplify all of that, but you know. But the crucial aspect has also helped to reduce, not entirely eliminate, but reduce the racism in Australia. Unfortunately, some politicians have capitalised on the potential of rising up the racism, and in fact, Vietnamese have contributed, I think, more than almost anybody else. One of the great things too, which you're all well aware of, the rate of integration. And the last statistics I saw, 75% of the Vietnamese who arrived here married, the first generation of those Vietnamese married non-Vietnamese. That's a dramatic change. And another, because after World War II, we really didn't welcome the Italians and Greeks as much as we should have. And so they tended to be a second or third generation before they intermarried. But the Vietnamese did it so quickly. And also what's interesting too is the last statistics I saw, the three most common names in Australia: Smith, Jones and Nguyen. I participated in the 25th anniversary of the New South Wales Vietnamese community with Dr. Tran Le Van, whom I admire very greatly, and she urged Australian business to engage with Australian Vietnamese to enhance the cross-cultural understanding in commerce so that Australia could trade more effectively in Vietnam itself and elsewhere in Asia. And from reports I've received, this has happened and has enhanced our advancement to being citizens of the world, which is a crucial thing we should try and do. We're not doing it as fast as I wanted, but it's happening. It's been aided by the Vietnamese Council of Australia, to whom we're indebted today. I've attended many functions of the Vietnamese Council and heard inspiring accounts of refugees who came here and they overcame cultural difficulties, and they applied and extended their skills, and they met complex challenges in their new land, and in doing so, they helped most Australians to overcome fears about Asian migration. Vietnamese, or people of Australians now of Vietnamese origin, have made varied but wonderful contributions, especially at local mayors, councillors, constitutional convention delegates, very important that was, and parliamentarians now. Like other migrants, they've settled in many regional areas and spread the understanding that as they assisted in blending and extending our culture. The celebrated chef, TV chef Luke Nguyen, and the portrait artist An Ho have demeanours and have a universal quality that epitomises the contribution that refugees and migrants are making to the exciting, evolving Australian culture. Through my son in particular, I've gained some insights into the views of people aged about 40 or below, and I've found that overwhelmingly they welcome the challenges of change and embrace the other cultures that share their core values. And the core value in particular is an exercise of freedom. They relate to each other as people. They're united by a love of freedom. They enrich each other's lives by gaining new experiences derived from other cultures. None of those are static. All who migrate freely or flee persecution embrace ardently the freedoms established here. But the culture surrounding those freedoms is constantly evolving, being excitingly enriched by aspects of virtually every other surviving culture. The contribution of Vietnamese refugees to Australia is immeasurable. To be a progressive and humanitarian nation, Australia must continue to embrace benefits brought by continuing revolutions in the transport and communications area and use those to extend the values incorporated in the International Human Rights Charter to all nations. If these values can be extended around the world, it should be possible to avoid another world war. But at this moment, there could be one on the doorstep, but it's the more we can embrace this universality of values and common sense, decency, the more we can possibly avoid another world war. It's the ignorance of the people who cause these wars that we have to cure from the grassroots. And that, by the way, I might say, is why I hope in the upcoming election a lot of independents who are progressive get in and have a balance of power to determine who and how will be governed in the coming years. The freedoms of the Charter of Human Rights recite central and essential values to our society. We're united by shared, essential commitment to freedom. Our landscape is constantly changing, especially as it aligns increasingly with Asia. Vietnamese refugees were a pioneering part of our bridge to Asia. For 3 million years, we've been separated from Asia by only 100 kilometres of open water. But culturally, both with Aboriginal and invading British, we're light years away from Asia. But many of our unsung Vietnamese champions have already created commercial, scientific and cultural links between Australia, Vietnam and other parts of Asia. Not even an island is an island in this satellite-driven world of converging technologies. The Vietnamese Museum of Melbourne is of profound importance because it records important aspects of the culture of refugees who fled South Vietnam when it was attacked by the North, and also records dramatic changes as they risked their lives fleeing tyranny and with difficulty gaining process into Australia. It also records the evolving years of settlement and integration. It will be a source of knowledge for so many people interested in the most important aspect of the evolution of Australia. I repeat for the umpteenth time, it's been a joy to share so many years with Vietnamese refugees, really well over 30 years I have now, and their descendants. And meeting their descendants is a joy. You've all made a marvellous contribution to the evolution of Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Ian, I believe the program that you initiated with the Health Department Interpreter Service allowed my mother to generate a second income, for the Geraldton local Vietnamese community. And of interest, I'm also one of those 70% that you mentioned who's married an Australian as well.
Cảm ơn ông Ian. Nhờ dịch vụ thông dịch của Bộ Y tế mà mẹ tôi đã có thêm nguồn lợi túc thứ hai khi bà làm việc như là thông dịch viên cho cộng đồng Việt Nam tại vùng Geraldton. Theo như ông nói thì tôi cũng là một trong những người thuộc 70% vì chồng tôi là người Úc.
Now I would like to invite Miss Kate Hoang, who is the National President for the Vietnamese Community of Australia, to address us.
Xin được giới thiệu cô Kate Hoang, Chủ tịch Cộng đồng người Việt tự do Liên bang Úc Châu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our special guest today, Mr. Ian McPhee AO, the Honourable Jason Wood MP, the Honourable Bill Shopton MP, Dr. Tin Kieu MP, Mr. Bernie Finn MP, and Mayor Anthony Tran. It is such a great honour for me to be here today at the relaunch. This is one of the biggest projects in the Vietnamese community in Australia and also in our history. The museum project, that is what we used to call. Thank you, the VMA board, and also the volunteers for all your effort to make today happen. The VMA started with a passion to preserve and to promote the Vietnamese culture and tradition overseas. It is more significant because we are the free Vietnamese community who wish to maintain not only our heritage, but also the freedom and democracy of the South Vietnam Republic. The heroic and sacrifices that our people have given for a free Vietnam, for the freedom from dictatorship and for free oppression of human rights, a history that the Vietnamese Communist government are afraid to tell. So there has been some delay and challenges that affect the progress of the project. But I have to acknowledge the efforts of the board of directors of VMA and the Vietnamese community to keep on going and overcome any challenges. Their determination to fulfill our objective and honor those perished at sea in the search for freedom must be admired and applauded. After the fall of Saigon, refugees faced violent storm, hunger, and dangerous boat journey in the search for freedom. After 47 years of establishment, the Vietnamese community continued to grow and contribute to the Australian society. I can see a lot of young people here today, including myself, the second generation of the Vietnamese in Australia. We admire what our parents and grandparents have been through, so we can be here today and enjoying the freedom and the democracy of Australia. The Vietnamese Museum project will help us to preserve and tell their story so the future generations can understand the sacrifices of their ancestors and why they decided to make these sacrifices. VMA is a statement of democracy. VMA stands for the freedom of the Vietnamese. The relaunch reminds us to keep on going. This is a long journey to fulfill our responsibilities and to preserve the history, the true history of Vietnam, the freedom and the history that is free from any political propaganda. Once again, I would like to congratulate the VMA and I sincerely wish you all the best in this project. VMA is something that we must support. The VCA Federal will stand with you to provide you with the support until the finish line. The Vietnamese Museum in Australia, once completed, would be the first one ever been built overseas. And congratulations. Thank you, and I would have a few words in Vietnamese. Thực sự là một niềm vinh hạnh cho các hoàng được đứng đây ngày hôm nay trong buổi lễ khai mạc lần thứ 2 của Viện Bảo Tàng Museum. Thực sự cảm ơn tất cả những người volunteer và những người đã tạo buổi lễ hôm nay được trở thành hiện thực. VMA có lẽ bắt đầu từ những cảm giác và những mong muốn được kéo dài và được truyền bá lại văn hóa của người Việt tại Úc. Và điều đặc biệt hơn, VMA không chỉ nói về văn hóa của người Việt mà đây còn là một trong những cái project mà chúng ta nêu cao lên tinh thần của người Việt Nam Cộng Hòa, những lịch sử, những giá trị, những điều mà Cộng sản Việt Nam luôn sợ hãi và giấu giếm tại Việt Nam. Có nhiều những sự chậm trễ trong việc xây dựng Viện Bảo tàng và chúng tôi chắc chắn rằng quý vị đã phải trải qua rất nhiều khó khăn và thử thách để có được đến ngày hôm nay. Chúng tôi ngưỡng mộ quý vị vì quý vị đã làm được những điều này và quý vị đã tiếp tục trên con đường của mình vượt qua khỏi mọi chông gai. Sau khi Sài Gòn bị thất thủ thì những người Việt đã phải đối mặt với những chuyến tàu rất là mạo hiểm và để đi kiếm được cái sự tự do ở trên đất nước này. Và ngày hôm nay là thế hệ thứ 2, cái Hoàng nhìn thấy rất nhiều người trẻ tham gia vào chương trình này và cái Hoàng tự hào khi biết được những gì mà ông cha ta đã trải qua, những người cha và những người mẹ, những người ông bà đã phải bỏ ra để cho những thế hệ trẻ ngày hôm nay được đứng đây trên đất Úc để cảm nhận được sự tự do và dân chủ. Chương trình Viện Bảo tàng không chỉ bảo tồn được văn hóa và truyền thống của người Việt mà đây còn là một lời khẳng định của tiếng nói của tự do và dân chủ trên toàn thế giới. Và một lần nữa, cái Hoàng xin chúc mừng tất cả mọi người, những thành viên của Viện Bảo tàng cũng như tất cả những người Việt đã bỏ công ra đóng góp để chúng ta có thể thực hiện chương trình này. Và VCA Federal chắc chắn sẽ đứng cùng quý vị đến khi chúng ta có thể thực hiện được chương trình này. Xin chân thành cảm ơn. Thank you, Kate, for your leadership. It is with pleasure now I'd like to invite Mr. Bon Nguyen in his capacity as the Victorian Chapter VCA President, who unfortunately is unable to be here today, so he's recorded a video to provide a few words. Thank goodness for technology.
Cảm ơn cô Kate. Sau đây là phần phát biểu của ông Nguyễn Văn Bon, Chủ tịch Cộng đồng người Việt tự do Victoria.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land and pay my respect to the elders past and present and emerging leaders, to the distinguished guests and my fellow community members. I am glad that I see the VMAs actually having the relaunch of the project. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join you today, but I'm happy that I see the relaunch is actually taking place, so that there's a good opportunity for the team to actually take you through the challenges and the difficulty that we're having, and I hope that you have a very successful relaunch today. Kính thưa toàn thể quý vị, kính thưa quý vị lãnh đạo tinh thần các tôn giáo, quý vị đại diện các hội đoàn, đoàn thể, quý cơ quan truyền thông cùng toàn thể đồng bào. Trước hết chúng tôi xin được thưa hôm nay chúng tôi không thể có mặt để cùng với quý vị trong cái dịp mà chúng ta relaunch trong kỳ này. Tuy nhiên chúng tôi nghĩ rằng đây là một cái dịp rất là tốt để cho Viện Bảo tàng có cái cơ hội để đi cùng với quý vị, giải thích cho quý vị thấy những cái khó khăn hay là những cái thắc mắc mà quý vị đã có. Thì tôi mong đây là cái cơ hội rất là tốt. Chúc quý vị thành công và gặt hái được nhiều. Xin trân trọng kính chào toàn thể quý vị.
Thank you, Bon. We will now have a contemporary hat dance with the song Shine Your Light by Min from members of the Dual Identity Leadership Program. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Dạ, xin mời quý vị thưởng thức phần trình diễn của nhóm lãnh đạo hai nguồn gốc, trình diễn phần múa nhạc là Shine Your Light. Thank you.
Ai như đưa tao
very much, guys. Next, I would like to invite the Honourable Jason Wood, Federal Assistant Minister for Multicultural Affairs, to join us and have a few words.
Xin mời ông Thượng tá Bộ trưởng Ban Văn hóa sự vụ dân hiệu chuyên ban Jason Wood.
Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's fabulous to be here. First of all, can I acknowledge the traditional owners of our land, the elders, past and present. I very much thank the Vietnamese Museum Australia for inviting me to this relaunch today. We have a number of dignitaries. I just also like to acknowledge Jen Handor, Kim Bung Kwong and Bruce Middlehall. Also my state and federal colleagues. I acknowledge the Honourable Bill Short. I know he's been very passionate about this project too. Dr. Daniel Molino, who's also a federal colleague. Bernie Finn, House member. Katie Hall, I know this is your own electorate here. Dr. TNQ, we always meet each other at many functions, so it's great to be here today with him. Natalie Solomon MP and Dr. Vivian Nguyen, chairperson of Victorian Multicultural Commission, also former state and federal members of parliament, and those from the Vietnamese community in Australia, National President Kate Hong and Victorian President Bon Nguyen, councillors and distinguished guests. Can I just, in my capacity here today as Assistant Minister, very much congratulate you on establishing a dedicated museum to preserving Vietnamese heritage in culture here in Australia. And I was very proud last federal election, the Liberal Morrison government committed $5 million to this facility, and also acknowledge Bill Short for also making a similar amount of money. The bipartisanship when it comes to the Vietnamese community is so important. We're very much looking forward to construction to start a museum in Footscray. It promises to be a valuable centre for telling stories of the Vietnamese refugees and their settlement in Australia and their significant contribution to Australia in general, with over 300,000 people in Australia who identify themselves as being of Vietnamese ancestry, including 108,000 here in what I call the most multicultural town or suburb in Australia, and that is here in Footscray, and also down in Dandenong we have a very similar multicultural community. The Vietnamese community has succeeded in all fields of endeavour, from politics, business, education, the arts, and you have ensured we have a very firm history of the Vietnamese community in Australia with this museum. And something which I've been very passionate about, and also the Prime Minister Scott Ryan, and that's ensuring our places of worship, and we respect faiths and protect those. We shouldn't need to do it, but we've had to do it. And under the Safer Communities funding, and I actually look after that funding, I've been very proud to have enabled the Vietnamese Evangelical Church in Australia, Melbourne, to install cameras and security lights, bollards and alarms, and at the church in Footscray site. It has also enabled the North Victorian Buddhist Association to install security infrastructure cameras at Mipnong. And once this museum is up and running, I'll be very supportive of also providing what security is needed here. And finally, the government will be committed $10 million to learning continuing to have the mother tongue of wherever you've come from, whether it be from Vietnam or anywhere around the world. I know the Vietnamese community has embraced this program. And I found this is so important in my own family. My wife was actually born in Hong Kong, and when I first met her relatives or mother-in-law, I tried to impress her by speaking a bit of Cantonese. And instead of saying to my mother-in-law or future mother-in-law that my wife, or Judy's a beautiful young woman, instead I said, Judy's a beautiful old man. So I know how important it is making sure we get language right. So again, congratulations. I'll be very supportive of this project in the future. I know there's a shortfall, and I'll see what we can do at the federal level. Thanks very much.
I'd like to now invite Dr. Tien Kieu, who's representing the State Minister of Multicultural Affairs, Ross Spencer, who couldn't be here today.
Cảm ơn ông Jason. Xin mời Dr. Kiều Tiến Dũng, giám biểu tiểu bang Victoria, đại diện cho Bộ trưởng Đa văn hóa tiểu bang Victoria, Ross Spencer.
Thank you. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are all gathering here today and pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And thank you, Auntie Jetla, for a very beautiful and meaningful welcome to the country. I would like also to acknowledge Jason Wood from the federal and the Honorable Bill Sultan, and also a federal member, Dr. Daniel Molino, and from the state, Ms. Katie Ho, the member for Footscray, and also Bernie Finn from my part of the parliament. And I also to thank Bruce Ludoho, the chair of the chair of the board of directors for the VMA, and all the committee members, and also all the organizing committee for putting on the relaunch today. Also like to acknowledge the presence of many councillors, mayor for various councils who are here today, and so on the way from Sydney, the president of the VCA, and also I thank VCA Vic, Mr. Bon Nguyen, the chair, the president of VCA Victoria Community in Australia is Ms. Kate Wan. So thank you for coming all the way from Sydney to Melbourne today for this relaunch. And also to all the representatives and community leaders, business leaders and religious leaders who are here today. It is a great honor for me to be here today, and also with a great pride as well. I'm here also on behalf of the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, the Honorable Ross Spence, who cannot come here today, but she sent her best wishes for a successful, not just for the relaunch, but also for the whole project. The commitment, the support, and the building of the Vietnamese Museum is a very important milestone in the community, but also in the state history of Victoria. This shows that Victoria is a very strong, vibrant state of the multicultural contribution from many different communities. This event of a Vietnamese museum is very significant and very meaningful. The Vietnamese community has been here for 47 years since the fall of Saigon in 1975. As Mr. Ian McPhee, thank you, sir, for being here today. And just for the record, I was a board person, and I also spent time in Pulau Bilong. I didn't meet you there, but from there, I then got a visa on humanitarian ground to come here and be a professor of physics for some time, but now I found myself as a politician. So that's a long way, long story to tell. So the contribution of, particularly on the Vietnamese Australian, has been very significantly and strongly contributing to our state, in particular, and Australia as a whole, in all aspects of life, from social, economic, cultural, and we can find people in all professions. This is a great contribution, and also to further sharing and contributing that to our society, our community. The Vietnamese Museum will be a great institution for that purpose. The Vietnamese community hopes and will realize that the Vietnamese Museum in Australia will be the place to showcase, to share, to contribute, not just the culture, not just the heritage, but also the history of the Vietnamese refugees who came here and chose to be in this country and take this country as their own. This history is a very important part. The history is being rewritten and distortedly and has to be preserved, and the truth has to be told. And I'm very proud of being a member of the state government who has contributed to this project greatly, and also as being a member of the Vietnamese community. And this project is the largest single commitment ever from the state government of Victoria to the tune of $4.5 million. And I also thank the federal for the contribution. It's very much, we are grateful for that. And I may hold you to, later on, if there is any shortfall, we come back and knock on your door. The museum is already on the way, and today is the relaunch. There is still a lot to be done, particularly in the fundraising. And there are some activities already on the way, already on the way, but also will be intensified after this relaunch today. It's also the place that the Vietnamese community can preserve their history, their culture, and their heritage for the generation of the Vietnamese Australians who have been here, born here, and to preserve their heritage as a contribution to the multiculturalism of our state in particular. So through our commitment to the building of this museum, we ensure that the Vietnamese communities know that Victoria is the place that they will always belong. So in concluding, I like to thank the organizer for this opportunity to say a few words, and I am very glad to be here on the behalf of the Victorian State Government, and I wish you all, particularly the committee, to be able to raise the necessary fund so that we can complete this project. It's the biggest single project of the Vietnamese community here, not just in Victoria, but also in Australia and also throughout the world in the Vietnamese diaspora. We wish you all the best, and I'm very much looking forward to the opening of the museum in not so distant future. Thank you. I'd like to do some very brief in Vietnamese. Kính thưa toàn thể quý vị, tôi rất lấy làm vinh dự và rất là tự hào là tới đây ngày hôm nay để đại diện cho chính phủ Victoria, đại diện cho Bộ trưởng Văn hóa Sự vụ bà Ross Spence, và đồng thời tôi cũng là một dân biểu của tiểu bang ở vùng Đông Nam Melbourne. Đây là một cái sự kiện và một cái công trình rất là lớn, không những cho cộng đồng chúng ta ở tiểu bang này mà còn toàn thể nước Úc và cũng khắp nơi trên thế giới. Đây là một cái sự đóng góp rất là lớn của chính phủ tiểu bang, 4,5 triệu. Đây là con số rất là lớn nhất trong cái lĩnh vực đa văn hóa của tiểu bang Victoria từ trước tới giờ. Và tôi cũng xin cảm ơn liên bang, chính phủ liên bang cũng đã đóng góp cho vấn đề này. Tôi xin ngắn gọn, Viện Bảo Tàng là một cái công trình rất là quan trọng để mà bảo tồn cái văn hóa và đồng thời cái lịch sử của chúng ta cho những thế hệ sau và để chia sẻ với người Úc. Và đây là một cái nơi mà chúng ta có thể tự hào về cái nguồn gốc và quá khứ của người tị nạn, và đặc biệt là cái lịch sử của người tị nạn và lịch sử của Việt Nam sẽ không bị bóp méo bởi những người đang cố gắng bóp méo sự thật. Tôi xin nhân câu hỏi này xin chúc mừng và cũng xin kính chúc Viện Bảo Tàng tất cả mọi thành công trong một thời gian không xa, và rất là mong muốn là sẽ có dịp được để mà tới tham dự cái lễ khánh thành của Viện Bảo Tàng.
Thank you, Dr. Tien. Next, it is with pleasure that I invite the Honourable Bill Shorten, who is the member of the Maribyrnong, who will address us now. Please welcome Bill.
Sau đây chúng tôi xin được giới thiệu lãnh tụ với danh biểu liên bang khu vực Maribyrnong, ông Bill Shorten.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me here. So all the dignitaries have been acknowledged, but I do say to Ian McPhee, it's a privilege to hear you talk about the contribution that you made to immigration and refugees. And in a time when politics isn't always held in the highest esteem, I do acknowledge that your conduct helps make people of all political views walk a little taller. And so thank you very much. Plenty of lovely people here from politics. I won't mention them all, but I will give a shout out to my colleague, Dr. Daniel Molino. This has been part of my electorate. Under the rules, the electoral commissioner gods move boundaries around, so sadly I don't get to represent so much of this area. But Dr. Daniel Molino will be, provided he gets elected, of course. And he's an outstanding representative, so I encourage the community to utilise Daniel as he utilised me, because he really is one of the best and brightest in our federal parliament. I just wanted to make 3 points really. One was to start off with a bit of a confession. I like museums. Some people like football, some people like pies, and they're both eminent choices. I like museums. And I just say to the museum committee that there's a lot of studies done about how you make museums more interesting to people. I'll give you one tip, apparently, and this might please Jason Wood and Bernie Finn. When people walk into a museum, they turn right. This is what they do. But that's okay. And then they walk in an anti-clockwise direction. So as you're laying out your exhibits, free advice, and of course, free advice is worth what you pay for. But I did want to make a more serious point about museums. This is really the second of the points. I'm really pleased to be here with all of you because I have the greatest of respect for the study of history, and I have the greatest of respect for the contribution of Australians of Vietnamese heritage to this country that I love, Australia. But on the history, the time for this museum is now. And I think about the 50th anniversary. There are people who can tell their stories now who in 10 and 20 years will not be available to tell their stories. So we have not a minute for that. But if you needed to be reminded of the importance of the study of history, sadly, we see it in the last 48 hours. Unimaginable on the European continent. Tanks and missiles and the most modern weapons of war being used against a sovereign independent nation. Staggering, incomprehensible. And I feel for many of our younger Australians, and many of us have never lived through serious conflict, such as Australians of Vietnamese heritage and our veterans who served over there. To a lot of us that's alien and unfamiliar. But it can happen. And when you deal with autocrats and dictators and bullies for whom there is no rational approach or negotiation, that's where the study of history comes in, to understand the consequences of these actions and the importance of standing up against such actions. We saw it late last year, in those scenes of the fall of Kabul, whilst the Afghan war was very different to the war of the people of the Republic of South Vietnam. There's some of the images of people fleeing. So, just as we have a time urgency for the study of the contribution of Vietnamese Australians to Australia, we have a time urgency which is on our very television screens. we must understand. Must understand the consequences. So, you know, it's a pleasure to be here talking about the study, history, and museum, and people's contribution. But it comes to the third of the 3 points I wanted to make. Not just museums and not just history. But I'm pleased to be here because I respect Vietnamese Australians. And these aren't just polite words which fall easily from the lips of a politician at a gathering. My first real exposure to Vietnamese Australians, like many of us, I was educated in a Catholic school. So we started to see the first Vietnamese kids turning up in our schools. It gave us, who don't speak French, it meant we had no chance of ever doing well in French. And it meant that we were never going to get picked for the first soccer team either. But more seriously, then when I was at university, I had the chance to, in the late 80s, work at the Springvale Legal Service as a volunteer. And I remember the Vietnamese people who came to that legal service taught me so much and meant so many lessons which I've carried through my public life. The first is that when someone isn't a native speaker of your language, you've got to take time to listen. You've got to have the translation and the TIS service, you know, that was certainly use that. But then as you listen, and this is, some of the people here had been through the camps and on the boats, and they were beginning to lay down some roots in Springvale in the era I was, by the late 80s. But the level of trauma, it's perhaps easy to forget, not for the person, but for others. It was a dangerous journey, being ripped away from your own village and town. It takes great courage to leave. Refugees and migrants are courageous people. You can't be weak and be a refugee. And the journey, the desire to protect your family against all odds, from the pirates to the camps and to life in Australia, was not easy. The achievements of these talented young Vietnamese leaders that we see dancing, it's hard won, and it's generationally hard won. The small businesses dealing with landlords ripping them off. The sad fact of families breaking up under the pressure. Family reunion. Just the basics, and then you have to do it in another language, in another city, in another country. And look at the success now. One of the things I think is most incumbent upon our political system, and we don't always achieve it, is to deliver hope. Hope is the essential petrol which drives people. Hope is what gets us out of bed in the morning and keeps us going all day. Hope for your family. Hope for a better job. Hope for a good market school. Hope for ideas of leisure and having a home. So I see this museum as a very important proposition. See, if we know our history, and the history of the Vietnamese contribution in Australia and struggle is a story actually of hardship and hope. I got to be at the presentation of the VCE Awards for some of the brighter kids of Vietnamese background. It was funny, I was there with a series of politicians. There's only two ways you could have been at this awards late last year, or it's the beginning of this year. Only two ways. One is you had to get 98.5 or above, or you could be a politician. And I was watching, it's Bruce Mildenhall, the remarkable Bruce, was telling me that the dancers, good luck translating everything I've said, I hope it works, but in Australia, most of us just try and lead, but we don't have to dance and lead. So we're already doing very well, I feel. But anyway, I think today's about hope. I want to say to Jason Wood, who I thought gave a very, very nice and generous speech, that maybe we could speak to Michael Sukkar, and maybe we could say to him that in 2025 will be the 50th anniversary. So why not get the Mint, and I used to be Assistant Treasurer, so they can do these things. Why don't we get them to now start working on commissioning a coin, and that can be used as part of the fundraising for this. have such respect. No Australian family ever complains when a Vietnamese Australian family move next door. No parent of a child in school ever complains when they've got kids of Vietnamese heritage in their children's class. No business ever complains when they can have Vietnamese Australian employees as part of their business. No political party is ever unhappy when they get the vote of Vietnamese Australians. I think this is a fine idea, this museum, but we don't have a minute to waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and I believe you've had some involvement in the land acquisition on behalf of the VMA as well. Now I'm pleased to be welcoming Mr. Bernie Finn, Liberal State MP. Please welcome him.
Xin mời các vị tự do của anh Bernie Finn.
Well, thank you all very, very much. It is a delight to be here, as it always is, with my friends in the Vietnamese community. And Bill, can I just say to you, Bill Shorten, if I was a Collingwood supporter, I'd prefer museums too. It is, as I say, it's always a delight to be with my friends in the Vietnamese community because in the almost 16 years that I've represented the Western Suburbs, one of the greatest joys that I've had is to be with you all. On so many occasions throughout the year, it's been a joy. The last couple of years have been a bit difficult, obviously, but I'm certainly looking forward to the opening of this museum. And Bruce, I say to you and to your team, congratulations. You're just doing a brilliant job. Bruce and I have known each other for a long time. We haven't always sat on the same side as each other, but we have known each other for a long time. And I just want to publicly congratulate you and your team on what you are doing, because this is a particularly important project, not just for the Vietnamese community, but I think for Victoria, not just for the Western Suburbs, but for Victoria, because this is such the Vietnamese story is such an important part of Victoria's history. And it needs to be told properly, and I know that you'll bring that about. I have absolutely no doubt about that at all. I want to just very briefly today, because we are getting on a bit in the Bangladeshi community and waiting for me down in Werribee. I just want to say to you that the Vietnamese community has made a huge contribution to this state. There are large parts of the Western Suburbs that would not exist anymore without the Vietnamese community. And I look at Footscray, for example. It's a classic example. I doubt if there'd be a business community in Footscray without the Vietnamese contribution. St Albans is another one. Sunshine, another one. You can go through so many parts of the West and the East as well, I suppose, where the Vietnamese community contribution has just been absolutely enormous. And I think that this museum needs to fully explain what that contribution means to Australia. Certainly, we need to know about what has happened in Vietnam. We need to know what continues to happen in Vietnam under the tyranny of the communist regime. But what I would hope is that you will not just look back, but you will look forward. I hope that, and I hope I'm not out of line in saying this, I hope that this museum will be a beacon of freedom, shining for all to see, because there are not too many communities who understand more about appreciating freedom than the Vietnamese community. There are people here who have fled for their lives to get away from people who were about to kill them, to come to Australia, to enjoy the freedom that, well, I suppose until very recently we all took for granted. This is something that I think you should perhaps take on board, because I don't think there is another community in this country that exemplifies freedom the way the Vietnamese community does. So I would suggest to you very strongly, yes, put all the history involved, because that's extremely important, but look forward and tell the world that the Australian Vietnamese community is a community of and for freedom. That is something that we must, I think that is something that is so important, Ladies and gentlemen, it is always a joy to be with you all. As I think it was Bruce said a bit earlier on, it's a very smiling community. In fact, when I thought very, very early on that they were very nice to me. I found out they're very nice to everyone. So that's all right. I can use that. That's not a problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to see Jason here today as the Assistant Minister, Bill, of course, and all my state and federal parliamentary colleagues. Few too many to go through yet again. But I thank you for the opportunity of being with you. I just enjoy your company so much, and I look forward to the opening of this museum. It's going to be something very, very special. This is a very, very exciting day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. I couldn't find any photos of you that weren't action photos, so I thought I did pretty well with that one. Now, did you know that the Maribyrnong Council welcomed its youngest mayor in its history last year at the age of 22? If you haven't, I would like you to now meet Mayor Anthony Tran as our next passionate speaker. Welcome, Anthony.
Quý vị có biết là năm ngoái là thành phố Maribyrnong có vị thị trưởng trẻ nhất trong lịch sử của hội đồng thành phố, chỉ mới tuổi 22. Xin được giới thiệu thị trưởng Anthony Trần.
First of all, good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation and offer my respects to their elders and through them to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples past, present and emerging. Bill, I may take you up on your offer and skip over the commentary on the dignitaries. I think everyone has recognised everyone quite a few times already. I have a script in front of me, but I don't believe the script does any justice to what the museum really means, so I may just set this aside for now. I may speak to this rather than as the Mayor of the City of Maribyrnong, rather as the product of the marriage of two cultures, the product of the marriage of the Australian culture and the Vietnamese culture, and the history, the long-standing history that we have together. Just as you said, Ian, that you were saying to yourselves, that we're here today, our families, our community, and we're honoured, we're blessed to have you here with us today. This museum is a way for us to preserve our culture, a way for us to preserve our heritage. It isn't the only way that we preserve our culture and our heritage. As you said, Bill, dancing is a big part of our community and a big part of leadership. And those young performers from the Joy Identity Leadership Program, I pay my respects to them as well, not just as a friend, but as an alumni to that program. We stand here on the cusp of something extremely special, not just for the Vietnamese community, as you said, but rather for Australia in general. We stand here with something that is so special that we should be able to share it with the world. Something that will be honoured by both sides, as stated, with the bipartisan support. No words can truly express how grateful I am, nor how grateful the Vietnamese community are for the support that we've had from both federal and state government in terms of funding. Again, thank you so much. And I'm short of words because honestly I'm just blessed to see the many people who have gone through this project, from the VMA team to the young people who do the volunteering work as well. Continue the good work. Thank you so much, everyone.
Tall Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Very knowledgeable and very outcomes focused, I believe. So many of you would know our next speaker, whom I would describe as being a mentor to many of us, a clear and consistent communicator. Miss Vivian Nguyen AM is the Multicultural Commissioner for Victoria. Please join me in welcoming her.
Xin chào phần đa văn hóa của anh Victoria.
Thank you, Harry, for your comments. I too would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to the elders past and present. In front of me are so many distinguished guests. I acknowledge and pay respect to each and every one of you. Many years ago, when I first came to Australia, I watched a movie called The Castle. And it said, the man, I remember the man saying on TV, it's not a house, it's a home. This museum is about that. It is a home. It is a home that brings in so much history, culture, struggle, resilience, compassion, and achievements of many Australians and Vietnamese. In this home, we welcome every one of you here today, gone before us, and in the future in front of us. It is a home that has so much richness, and I thank each and every one of you for making the trip to this event today, but also to continue your support to the museum. Kính thưa quý vị, khi phần Việt mới đến Úc coi một cái phim nó gọi là phim The Castle, thì cái ông này ông nói khi mà người ta muốn bán đất đi để mà phá nhà của để xây phi trường ở Melbourne Airport, thì ông nói với người ta là không có thể nào làm được như vậy, là bởi vì đây không phải là một cái nhà mà nó là một cái gia đình của tôi. Gia đình của tôi có rất nhiều những ân tình, những kỷ niệm, những lịch sử, những tình thương và tất cả những kỷ niệm cũng giống như là những cái khó khăn mà cộng đồng người Việt tị nạn của chúng ta đã trải qua. Ngôi nhà này sẽ được mở rộng vòng tay để đón nhận tất cả những người đã đi qua trước chúng ta, những người đã đóng góp xây dựng và bảo vệ, như những người đang hiện diện và những người sẽ đến với chúng ta trong tương lai. Phường Mỹ xin đại diện cho Hội đồng Đa văn hóa Việt Nam rất kính mong quý vị tiếp tục hỗ trợ dự án Viện Bảo Tàng để một ngày gần đây Viện Bảo Tàng sẽ được thành công mở rộng vòng tay đón nhận tất cả những gì của người Việt của chúng ta mang ơn đất nước này, cũng như tất cả những gì người Việt của chúng ta mong mỏi cho một quê hương được tự do thanh bình. Xin chân thành cảm ơn.
Thank you, Vivienne. Many of you would appreciate that each culture has its own costumes, which is a symbol of national pride. During festivals, ceremonies or meetings like today, those who wear an áo dài show their respect to others, their heritage and values. Today we invite you to enjoy the áo dài parade.
Thưa quý vị, mỗi nền văn hóa đều có những tiêu biểu để hãnh diện. Áo dài là niềm hãnh diện và có ý nghĩa truyền thống của người Việt. Xin quý vị thưởng thức màn trình diễn áo dài.
Một